Good morning, my name is Sarah and I'm going to explain how I have carried out the task of the cultural accommodations of the website of the University of Alicante, particularly the welcome message and the introduction to the strategic plan. Well, since I have to adapt those pieces of information to an international audience, the first thing I realized was that there was an influence of the Spanish background on the communicative style used. So what I did was to introduce some changes in order to make it effective for an international audience. Well, the first thing I saw had to do with the length of a text. I saw a tendency for the use of long paragraphs, and within those paragraphs the use of long sentences in the case of the Spanish version. So what I decided was to give them shorter, just 2-3 lines I considered to be enough to express the idea. Then the purpose statement in the case of the Spanish version tends to be postponed. A feature typical of the Spanish culture, we tend to present the purpose statement in a very indirect way or to delay it. So in this example taken in the welcome message, you can see that the purpose statement appears at the end in the case of the Spanish version. And this is contrary to from what a native speaker of the English language will expect to find. So what I did was to move the purpose statement and I announced it from the very beginning in a very direct way, and it says, our aim is to do everything we can to help you to get the best from your chosen course of study and to turn you into valuable professionals. Well, those features have to do with Hofstede's value dimension of uncertainty avoidance index, and in the case of the Spanish version, the uncertainty avoidance index is strong, that we see a tendency for the use of digressiveness, long paragraphs and long sentences, and even the purpose statement is postponed. While in the case of the British culture, the uncertainty avoidance index is low. So I have to change those features in order to be more direct and to keep the length of the paragraphs and sentences shorter and to anticipate the purpose statement. Well, the way the Spanish version refers to the audience promotes a very close and personal contact. So it addresses the audience closely using expressive language. For instance, in the example, it says, we are pleased to give you our warmest welcome to the institutional website of the University of Alicante and feel grateful for your interest in knowing us better. So what I did was to change the first one into the second one, and it says, I am delighted that you have chosen to study at the University of Alicante, in order to promote more distance with the audience. And as you can see in this sample, I also used a more direct and aggressive style, which is typical of the British culture. Well, in addition, in the case of the Spanish version, it even uses involvement strategies, and it refers to the self as a group. We denoted a collective culture, and for instance, in the example taken from the welcome message, we see a constantly used of we wish the best education, we wish to help them, we expect that surrounding public administrations, we expect that your visit, which implies the use of positive politeness and that it approaches the audience in a very feminine form. So what I decided was to keep those expressions out and to use independent strategies to refer to the self as an individual person. So I used the first person pronoun I instead of using the pronoun we. And those features have to do again with Hofstede's value dimensions and also with Edward Hull's value dimensions. So in the first case, it has to do with Edward Hull's value dimension of the personal space, which differentiates between the contact and non-contact cultures, and it is also related to Hofstede's value dimension of masculinity index, which differentiates between the people-oriented cultures and task-oriented cultures. And in the second case, it is related to Hofstede's value dimension of individualism index, which shows that the Spanish culture is a collective culture, while the British culture is an individualistic culture. And finally, I have also found some grammatical errors that I have corrected in order to obtain a coherent and cohesive version that will be effective for native audience of the English language. And as a final remark, I also found some differences regarding the signature. So in the case of the welcome message, it was signed as the university president, while in the case of the introduction to the strategic plan, it was signed as the rector. So what I did was to unify those terms and to use the university president for both cases. And finally, as a conclusion, I would like to emphasize the fact that whenever you want to reach an international audience, it is important for you to look for the cultural adequacy. That is to say that you must be able to adapt yourselves to the adverse cultural features and expectations, in order to promote a good image of yourself and to reach the intended goals. And the best way to obtain that cultural adequacy is not to use translators that you can find on the internet and that provide very bad quality translations, for instance Google, but to rely on people that are professionally qualified and that have language skills in order to adapt this kind of information that will be and in order to adapt this kind of information and that will be effective for the target audience. And finally, you can see here some references that I have used in order to perform this task. Thank you for your attention.